All right, let's dive into some interesting ideas about American healthcare. Today we're looking at it through the lens of Dr. Berg and his YouTube video. Here's my 2 cents, making America healthy again.
It's been getting a lot of attention lately.
Yeah, especially with all the talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. possibly becoming the next Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It is a pretty intriguing scenario. RFK Jr. has been outspoken about health and wellness for a while now.
He has, and he's already facing some pushback. Big food, big pharma, those sorts of folks.
Yeah.
They're not too happy about him possibly shaking things up.
Makes sense. They probably like things the way they are.
Probably. And
Yeah.
Dr. Berg, he's not exactly shying away from controversy either. He tackles some pretty big issues head on. Like, he questions the science behind a lot of common practices and talks about corruption within the system.
He does?
And he even talks about ending chronic disease.
Wow, that's an
Yeah.
ambitious goal.
It is ambitious. What's
Yeah.
interesting is how Dr. Berg addresses that counter-argument we've been hearing. The one that claims there's no clear evidence linking processed food to disease.
I've heard that one. It's a popular one.
Yeah, he basically says, okay, fine. Let's look at the U.S. then. We spend trillions on healthcare, but our health outcomes are pretty bad compared to other developed nations.
Right.
So if processed food doesn't play a role, then what is going on?
Yeah. It really makes you think, if it's not the food, then what is it? Why aren't we getting any healthier?
Exactly. Dr. Berg really makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just point out the problems. He offers solutions.
Yeah.
What does he actually think we should do to get things back on track?
Well, he has this three-pronged approach. He calls it making America healthy again. And it all starts with what he calls institutional food. So think like hospitals, schools, prisons, places like that.
Places that serve a lot of meals.
Exactly. And his take on it is pretty harsh. He says it's the lowest quality food on the planet.
Wow, the lowest quality. Does he give any examples of why he thinks that?
He does. He tells a story about his own experience in the hospital after surgery. He really needed some good protein to help him heal.
Makes sense.
But the staff, they basically said, sorry, not much we can do.
Oh, wow. That's unsettling.
Yeah, to think a place dedicated to healing would serve food that could actually hinder recovery.
It's a good point. We always think about healthcare in terms of surgery, medication, technology. But maybe we should be thinking more about food.
Right, especially for people who are already vulnerable.
You're right. Food is medicine.
Yeah.
He also interviewed the owner of several assisted living homes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he asked about, what would keep them from using a healthier food system. And the owner told him the biggest obstacle wasn't people not wanting to do it. It was the regulations about what the residents were allowed to eat.
Really? Regulations are getting in the way of healthier food.
That's what Dr. Berg says. So even if people want to make changes, the system itself might be holding them back.
Wow.
It's pretty discouraging. But what does he actually suggest we do about this institutional food problem?
His solution's pretty straightforward, actually. Get rid of the refined sugars, starches, and oils from the menus in those institutions. Just serve real, whole foods.
So cut the junk, serve real food.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But I know Dr. Berg's ideas go beyond just changing the menus, right? He wants to change the system itself.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about government subsidies. He says the U.S. spends something like $600 billion a year on them, and most of it goes to corn.
Corn subsidies. Wait, isn't corn healthy? I mean, corn on the cob, that kind of thing?
It is, but it's not the kind of corn that gets the subsidies.
Oh,
it's mostly dent corn, which goes into animal feed and processed food ingredients.
Like high fructose corn syrup.
Exactly.
Okay. But why are these subsidies even in place? I mean, what's wrong with them?
Well, they were started way back after the Great Depression, to help farmers.
Right.
But now, all these years later, Dr. Berg says they're actually hurting small farmers who are trying to grow healthier food.
Because it's hard for them to compete.
Exactly. They can't compete with the big corn producers who are getting all those subsidies.
So he wants to shift those subsidies to support the farmers growing the good stuff.
That's right.
I mean, that sounds great, but it also sounds like a really huge undertaking.
It does.
To change the whole agricultural industry like that. It makes you wonder if it's even possible.
It's definitely a big question.
Yeah, a big question. But wait, there's one more part to Dr. Berg's plan, right?
Right. His third target. This one's called Generally Recognized as Safe, or GRAS.
Okay, GRAS, what is that?
Well, you'd think generally recognized as safe would mean that something has been thoroughly tested and proven to be safe.
I would.
But according to Dr. Berg, it's not so simple.
So how does something get this GRAS label then?
This is where it gets interesting. The manufacturers actually self-certify their ingredients as safe.
Oh, they decide themselves. Isn't that a conflict of interest?
It definitely seems like it could be. And Dr. Berg gives some pretty shocking examples. Things like lead, DDT, mercury, they were all considered GRAS at one time.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah,
What we thought was safe then turned out to be really harmful.
exactly. And it makes you wonder, are we making the same mistakes today?
Yeah. It's a good reminder that we can't always trust industries to regulate themselves. Dr. Berg goes beyond the big picture, though. He has some specific changes he'd like to see,
Oh, yeah, he does.
but we'll save those specifics for next time. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about already. We've got institutional food, subsidies, and now this GRAS loophole.
3 big areas where Dr. Berg sees a need for change.
Yeah, and it's all connected, right? It's about how our food is produced, how it impacts our health, and how the government plays a role in all of it.
It all ties together.
It does. So I'm curious, what stands out to you the most so far? What are you thinking about?
You know, it's funny, Dr. Berg's advice goes against what we've been told about nutrition for years.
I know, right? Like all that stuff about a low-fat diet.
Totally different.
He basically says most junk food comes down to 3 things: sugar, starches, and oils.
Yeah, and he says it's not even just about moderation.
Right.
We need to completely rethink how we produce and consume those ingredients.
Stop the subsidies and help the farmers growing good food instead.
Exactly.
So basically, a systemic problem needs a systemic solution.
That's what he's saying.
Okay, but last time we left off talking about some of Dr. Berg's specific recommendations. What are some of the things he actually wants to see changed?
Well, one interesting one is replacing folic acid with folate.
Really?
Yeah.
But isn't folic acid good for you? Like, especially for pregnant women?
Well, it is, but he's talking about the synthetic kind.
Oh, there's a difference.
Yeah, apparently a lot of people have a genetic variation that makes it hard for them to absorb folic acid.
Oh, wow, I had no idea.
So Dr. Berg says we should switch to folate, which is the naturally occurring form.
So it's not that folic acid is bad, it's just that folate might be better for a lot of people.
Exactly. Like a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't always work when it comes to nutrition.
Makes sense. What else does he talk about?
He also mentions iron. Too much iron.
Too much iron.
Mm.
But don't we need iron for our blood?
We do, but he says having too much can actually lead to anemia.
Wait, really? I thought more iron meant less anemia.
I know, right? But apparently, too much iron can mess with your body's natural iron regulation.
So it's all about balance.
Exactly.
Interesting. So what about the pharmaceutical industry? What does he have to say about that?
Well, he's pretty critical of it.
I bet.
Like the whole system where universities can patent drugs developed with taxpayer money and then give exclusive rights to drug companies.
So the profits go to the companies, not the people who funded the research.
That's what he's saying.
But what about the FDA? Don't they make sure drugs are safe? And don't we need collaboration between universities and drug companies to develop new treatments?
He doesn't necessarily say we should get rid of all of that,
Yeah.
but he wants us to think about who benefits the most from the current system, the patients or the corporations.
It's a good question. We need to make sure the system is actually working for the people it's supposed to be helping.
Exactly. And he's also concerned about the ties between the FDA and Big Pharma.
Oh, like the revolving door thing, where people go back and forth between working for the FDA and working for the drug companies.
Exactly. How can you be objective if you're going back and forth like that?
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Right.
What else?
This one's interesting. He talks about the relationship between the junk food industry and dietitian organizations.
Really, dietitians and junk food?
Yeah, apparently there's a lot of financial ties between Coca-Cola and different dietitian groups.
Wow, so Big Soda is funding the people who are supposed to be teaching us about healthy eating.
It's pretty crazy.
That's wild. What does he suggest we do about it?
Be aware of it. Do your own research. Don't just trust what you're told.
So basically be a savvy consumer.
Exactly. And he talks about something called the rounding rule.
The rounding rule, what's that?
So food manufacturers can round down certain ingredients if they're in small amounts.
Like how small are we talking?
Less than half a gram of sugar can be rounded down to 0 on the label.
So they're basically hiding sugar.
Kind of, and when you add up all those tiny amounts from all the processed food we eat, it becomes a lot.
It's like they're tricking us.
It can feel that way. Dr. Berg says we need to be careful and really read those labels.
So we need to be smart shoppers and not just take the labels at face value.
Exactly. And he's not just concerned about human food. He talks about babies and pets, too.
Oh, yeah. What about them?
He thinks infant formula and pet food are full of junk.
Wow. He really goes for it.
He does. He wants to see warning labels on those products.
It makes sense, though. We want what's best for our babies and our pets.
Right, but we might be harming them without even realizing it.
It's all about making informed choices. What about vitamin D? Doesn't he talk about that too?
Yeah, he thinks the recommended daily allowance is way too low.
Really? I thought 600 IU was enough.
He says that might prevent rickets, but it's not enough for optimal health.
Oh, so what does he suggest?
He says most people should be taking closer to 8,000 IUs per day.
8,000. That's a lot more than what I'm taking.
It is. He talks about how vitamin D deficiency is linked to so many health problems like cancer, autoimmune diseases, even sleep issues.
I mean, I've heard vitamin D is important, but 8,000 seems like a lot. Does he have any evidence to back that up?
He says there's a lot of research showing that the current guidelines are outdated and that we need more vitamin D for our immune systems, our bones, everything, really.
Maybe I should look into that. But we should probably say that anyone making big changes to their diet or supplements should talk to their doctor first, right?
Absolutely. Dr. Berg says that too. But his main message is that we need to be informed and take control of our own health.
So do our own research and think critically about the information we're given.
Exactly. We can't just blindly trust what we're told.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Folic acid, iron, the pharmaceutical industry, the rounding rule, baby food, pet food, vitamin D. Dr. Berg really lays out a whole critique of the system and offers some pretty radical solutions. But what does it all actually mean for us? Like, how can we actually apply these ideas to our own lives?
That's the big question.
It is. And that's what we'll talk about next time. All right, so we've talked about Dr. Berg's issues with the American healthcare system, and we've gone over some of his solutions.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there.
There is. Now it's time for the big question.
What's that?
What's that? So what? What does it all mean for us? For our health? For the future of healthcare?
It's a big question for sure.
It is. And Dr. Berg's message is all about changing the way we think about health.
Yeah, he's not just saying, take this pill or see that doctor.
It's bigger than that.
It is. It's about all these systems that affect our well-being.
The food system, the pharmaceutical industry, government policies, even what we believe about being healthy.
It's all connected.
It can be a little overwhelming, honestly.
Yeah, it can. But instead of feeling stuck, I think Dr. Berg wants us to feel empowered.
Okay, empowered how?
We're not just along for the ride.
Right.
We have choices. We can speak up and demand change.
I like that, taking back control.
Exactly.
But where do we even start? Everything he's talking about seems so huge.
It can seem that way.
Yeah. How can one person really make a difference?
It starts with small steps.
Okay.
What are we eating? Are we reading labels? Are we paying attention to all those sneaky ingredients?
You mean like the sugar and stuff?
Yeah, and are we getting information from different sources, not just relying on what the industry or the government tells us?
So be informed, think critically, don't just accept things as they are.
Exactly. And our choices have an impact beyond ourselves.
What do you mean?
They affect our families, our communities, even the market.
So if we all start demanding healthier options, things will have to change.
Right. And we can pressure our elected officials to support policies that put our health first.
So it's about individual action and collective action working together.
Exactly.
Dr. Berg's whole vision is really about a completely different way of looking at healthcare.
I think so.
We're so focused on treating disease, but he wants us to focus on preventing it in the first place.
Right. Make prevention the priority.
And that means valuing nutrition and giving people the tools they need to take charge of their health.
It's a much more holistic approach.
It is. And it challenges a lot of our assumptions about what health even means.
We've been told that health is all about doctors and hospitals and pills.
But it's really about so much more than that.
It is. It's about how we eat, how we move, how we manage stress, how we connect with others.
It's about the whole person.
And it's about thriving, not just surviving.
Yeah, I like that. Thriving. It's hopeful.
It is.
But I know some people listening might be feeling overwhelmed. It's a lot to take in.
It is. But remember, you don't have to do everything at once.
Okay, so start small.
Start small. Pick one thing you can change today.
Like what?
Maybe drink water instead of soda. Or add some extra veggies to your dinner. Or go for a walk outside. It doesn't have to be a big thing.
Just one small change.
Exactly. It's about progress, not perfection.
And remember, you're not alone.
There are a lot of people who feel the same way.
Who want a better food system and a better healthcare system.
Yeah, and who want to take control of their health.
And when we all work together, that's when real change happens.
Absolutely. Collective action is powerful.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Berg's ideas,
Mm.
here's our question for you.
All right, I'm ready.
What will you do to make yourself a little healthier? Maybe even your community. What small step can you take today?
Yeah, what will you do? It's your health, your future.
It's worth fighting for.
It is.
That's all for today. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay healthy.